Very good. I wish to call to order this meeting of the Government Operations Subcommittee of the Health and Government Operations Committee. We have 5 bills on our agenda, and we will take action on them as, for the most part, in numerical order. We will begin with House Bill 235, the Opens Meeting Act, definition, administrative function. As the committee knows, as the subcommittee knows, we have discussed this bill before, so I would suggest that we should resolve today whether we want to move forward with this bill or not. Let me give the sponsor an opportunity to present a brief summary of the bill and also address the issues that have come up in previous discussions of the subcommittee. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to give you just a very brief recap on House Bill 235. This is the bill that says that public bodies, if they want to discuss a personnel matter for an employee who reports directly to the public body, like for a school board, it would be a superintendent. For a housing agency, it might be an executive director. For a municipality, it might be the city manager. It just clarifies that those type of meetings would fall under the Open Meetings Act. They would be held in closed session under one of the exceptions in the Closed Meeting Act, but the existence of that meeting would be disclosed. The public couldn't watch the meeting or necessarily know which employee it was or the details, but they would know that the meeting occurred and when and where the meeting occurred, as opposed to current law, which is meetings like that can happen under the administrative function and they don't have to be disclosed, and the public may not know about their existence. So the Open Meetings Compliance Board doesn't feel the bill is needed. Up to you to decide whether you think the bill is needed. There was a question last time around about how did this bill relate to the Maryland Environmental Service. We had a bill in 2021. Delegate Corman and McCrae, Senator McCrae had that bill, House Bill 1, House Bill 2, Senate Bill 2. And so under that bill, the Maryland Environmental Service was already a public body subject to the Open Meetings Act. And it just, I think, redefined and clarified the roles of the various board members. It said the executive director is called the executive director, not the director, and that he's a non-voting member of the board. But the controversial meetings that took place in May of, was it 2020, where the board discussed the director's compensation and severance package, those happened, those meetings were disclosed under the Open Meetings Act. So the board met on their agenda. They said, we're going to have a closed meeting to discuss the compensation of an employee. So they were already following what this bill seeks to codify. And because those meetings were disclosed, there was sort of a paper trail that allowed, I think, all of us, journalists, et cetera, to focus on that issue and fix some other issues. The board could have met under the administrative function and not disclose the existence of the meeting, and then the problems might have never been discovered or fixed had that happened. So with that, I will leave it to the wisdom of the subcommittee.
Delegate Saliga, followed by Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Carr. So I think what you're saying that we didn't need this bill because it worked at MES and we had another bill that corrected MES. But, of course, I come here having done my homework, and we have an unfavorable from the Maryland Municipal League, and we have a letter of unfavorable letter from the Open Meetings Compliance Board. And I think as a committee and a subcommittee, generally we respect the opinions, especially of the Open Meetings Compliance Board, because they're the ones overseeing this. And, you know, I would like to also point out that the person, Craig O'Donnell, who is favorable on this, lives in Delaware. So we have a Delaware resident that would like this bill, and two prominent Maryland organizations opposed to the bill. So I'm not quite sure how this subcommittee moves forward, you know, with that information.
Delegate Kaiser. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have problems with this bill, but different from the ones that Delegate Shaliga described. And I'm less concerned when certain groups oppose something, because I think that's where we come in and get to make some statements of our values. But what's problematic, so let me go, what I liked is that I think we need to know this kind of information, but I don't think the way the bill is doing it is actually helpful to the public. I'm a little confused process-wise. Yes, we should know about MES and any other place when any of these types of activities happen, but to know that a meeting happened and then maybe not finding out about the firing, the raise, the whatever personnel action to so many months later, I think there's a real disconnect. So I think there has to be a better mechanism to let people know. So that's where I am. I'm having trouble with the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Kipke, followed by Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to state my support for what Delegate Kaiser just said. I think that, you know, we have a reputation for really working together on issues like this with the folks that have to deal with it. And it just seems like there should be a better way of handling this. And it sounds like some work still needs to be done to get to that right solution. And it does sound like, although I didn't like the way it was characterized in their comments, it does seem to me that there are people who are truly experts at this who should be embraced to come up with the best solution. So thank you.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think one of my questions may have already been answered. But for Delegate Carr, just a few moments ago, you were saying that if you had, let me back up, that it will be covered if it was under the administrative function. If it were in place, then you would secure the information that you need. Is that what you were just referring to? You had made that statement just before you finished speaking.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. So I guess what I was trying to say was that under current law, a public body like MES or any other public body can claim they are meeting under the administrative function when they discuss a personal matter, and they're not subject to the Open Meetings Act at all. So they don't have to let the public know that a meeting took place, or when it took place, or what the topic was, as opposed to the best practice that this bill seeks to codify, which is that you, when you discuss a personal matter for your direct report, you do it under the provisions of the Open Meetings Act, so that you're disclosing, we met, we discussed a personal matter for an employee, here's when, here's where, and then that shows up in the, the minutes, of course, also of the next open meeting. And then if there's any decisions made in a closed meeting, that has to show up in the minutes, I believe, of the next open meeting. So it creates a paper trail. And of course, we passed the same bill last year on a party line vote. The chair pulled it back to committee and wrote to the Open Meetings Compliance Board asking them to address this issue over the interim. And they, you know, they still feel that the bill is not needed. I don't know that they truly respected the chair's request to take an in-depth look at this issue and find a solution.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. I just rolling over my mind, the additional work of the entities that have to undertake this additional process with still not getting a lot of information out of the process. And I think that's a little bit concerning for me, but thank you for the clarification.
Delegate Kipke.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to say something that I thought of last week that just popped back into my head now that I had another sip of coffee. You know, there's nothing, first of all,
Good coffee.
I think Delegate Carr, they don't have to include those things in their subsequent meeting minutes because those things are personnel matters. So there is no subsequent reporting of any kind of sensitive data that or information that is, you know, protected from the Open Meetings Act requirements. But, you know, sort of something that came into mind recently is, you know, if under this bill, if it were to be enacted, all of these groups could just have as a last order of business an executive meeting, and they could just list out legal matters, personnel matters, all the different things that are protected from public information requests, and then, you know, go into executive session and say, all right, do we have any legal matters, personal matters, yes or no, you know? And so it could just become a perfunctory thing. And that's really, you know, that's why I think that just more work needs to be done to get at what you're trying to get at, which I do appreciate and respect your effort on this. But I just think that a little bit more work needs to be done, and perhaps engaging personally with, as the champion of sunshine, engaging with this group who seems to be willing to do that, I think is the right path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Landis. You're muted.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I just want to confirm that the Open Meetings Compliance Board does not support this legislation. And the reason they don't support it is because they feel it's not necessary. Is that correct? Did I mishear?
Council, can you speak to that or not?
They expressed that they felt that there was not going to be an appreciable benefit from the bill, and they thought that it would increase the workload of both the compliance board and some public bodies.
Okay, thank you.
It's the sense of the chair that the sentiment of the subcommittee is not to move forward with the bill. And instead of an unfavorable, I would like to suggest hold off on taking a vote, but I think hopefully that's sending a message to Delegate Carr with regard to what he might choose to do with this bill. Okay. Thank you. We'll proceed to House Bill 237, State Government Maryland Veterans Commission. Council, Ms. Rowe, Lindsay.
This bill
Okay. Go ahead. I thought you were muted for a second. Sorry, my fault. Go ahead.
This bill expands the membership of the Maryland Veterans Commission by adding a representative of the Reserve Organization of America as a voting member. There are no amendments offered on this bill. Well, just to clarify, there was an amendment offered that then the sponsor in the bill hearing clarified was not necessary because the commission membership is already required to be a Maryland resident and veteran.
Okay, is there discussion? Is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Is there a
Second.
There is a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is.
We can't hear you, Sandy.
Okay, I will turn it up. Thank you.
Yeah, you're not muted, but it's almost like something's covering your microphone.
Okay, better now?
Not really. I'm just going to turn up my volume.
It's been better. Okay. There is a motion for favorable. All those in All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you. Favorable, unanimous. House Bill 279.
Whatever you did, Chairman, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I think you
Terrific.
put your, I think you put your arm on your microphone or something, because it happens a lot during hearings, and I don't think you're hitting anything. I think you're covering your microphone.
Oh, okay. Okay. House Bill 279, Council.
As originally introduced, this bill renames the Outreach and Advocacy Program in the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs to be the Office of Communications and Public Affairs. The office, in collaboration with the Maryland Higher Education Commission, must actively help veterans and their dependents become aware of and access education and training benefits to which they are entitled. The bill alters and expands the responsibilities of the Department of Veterans Affairs and the office as they relate to veteran services, including the contents of the department's annual report. The bill sponsor offered amendments on the bill, which I circulated to the subcommittee, that rename the Outreach Advocacy Program instead to be the Communications Outreach and Advocacy Program, retains the requirement that the director of the program implement an outreach plan.
Is there discussion
Move
on
the
the
amendment.
bill? The amendments are moved. Is there a second?
Second,
They are seconded. Any discussion? Delegate Zaliga.
I'm in favor of the amendment, so my discussion would be on the bill. Do you want me to hold my comments till we're done with this?
Yes, please. Thank you. There being no objection to the amendments are approved. Delegate Zaliga, is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Is there a second to that
Second.
motion? Delegate Zaliga on the bill as amended.
Thank you. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, so I'm in favor of the bill. I did read the bill, as generally speaking, I try to do on all the bills that I vote on. And I did go to the website for the Department of Veterans Affairs, which I would encourage all of you to do. And the first thing that comes up, where to go? Had it right up here on my, was the animal, let's see, where it talks about, Veteran Service Animal Program is, the first thing that pops up in the on the website. And so that's already being done. On line 21 of bill page 4 of the reprint, the director shall serve as necessary as the secretary's designee to appropriate commissions. So that's talking about for the council, for Lindsay, the Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary will let the director serve as the designee. Is that what that means? And somehow they're working
It
with
is.
MPEC?
Often when you see commissions and task forces created, they'll say the Secretary of Veterans Affairs or the Secretary's designee. This is just clarifying that when appropriate, if a commission or a task force or something is created, that this director should be that designee.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. And secondly, on page 4, lines 10 to 13, looks like the language was stricken where in conjunction with other governmental units and community-based groups seek out veterans and their dependents who may be eligible for pension programs and benefits. Why do we not want to keep doing that and inserting the animal program, which I'm all for animals. I just don't know why we're getting rid of that important language.
As far as why, that would be a question for the bill sponsor or any advocate, if there is one here.
Is that addressed by lines 4 through 8 on page 4? Which speaks to shall develop communications tools to assist in identifying veterans eligible for and manage the, eligible for benefits and programs offered by the department. Does that address your concern?
I don't know, I'm asking, because the line, paragraph 2 takes out wounded and disabled veterans as well. So I guess it's substituting coordinate the responsibilities of veteran service specialists. So maybe that's where they're taking care of that. I just don't want to, I'm a big fan of veteran service animals, but I'm a bigger fan of our veterans who need services. So as long as we're still taking care of them, I'm fine with it. Council, do you see that we're not deleting that important
I mean, the
mission?
being struck from the bill, it's really up to you all if you feel it's adequately captured through the other language that's being included.
I mean, I don't know what the other committee members think. If you've read the bill, you read the reprint, do you feel as though they're adequately addressing lines 10 through 15 on page 4, that language that's been removed? Are we putting that somewhere else? Wounded, disabled veterans and
Chair.
pension programs.
Delegate Hill.
Yeah, I see Delegate Shalega's point, and I guess my sense is that what the language is doing is broadening and not restricting what the program will do to simply those groups. And so I believe, and again, this is just how I've read the bill, that by taking out the specification, it's allowing the program to identify a broader range of veterans who might benefit from it and to offer or communicate the availability of the services to them.
So you see it as a broadening, not, I'm worried it's a narrowing where we're cutting out people and we're inserting service animals, which again, I love service animals. Don't misconstrue my, thoughts on the importance of service animals, but I don't want people to go second.
And it may be that we have to refer back to 9-944, right? Because that may be where it is. And Lindsay, I don't know if you're able to pull that up.
9944 just starts at the bottom of page 4. If you just continue looking down that page.
Okay, so why don't we go down there?
Well, maybe if again, I'm a co-sponsor, I'm not trying to derail or kill this bill, but I think people come first. I want to make sure that we're not diminishing the importance of the Department of Veterans Affairs servicing people. So maybe we could move the bill and get some answers. If we need to amend it in the full committee, we can do that. I'd be fine with that.
Move the bill.
Second.
All right, so the motion is to move the bill. Council will do research on the concerns raised by Delegate Szeliga and provide that information to all members of the subcommittee prior to the full committee voting session.
Can I just clarify again, I can't speak to the motivation of the sponsor in changing language. So I'm not sure exactly what it is.
So I'll clarify, and maybe, George Owings can give us the answer directly. He's not here. I would just ask him. But I just want to ensure that deleting the language on page 4, where we're deleting the language in lines 10 through 15 with regards to community-based groups for veterans, their dependents, eligible for pension programs, and then the second paragraph 2, provide wounded or disabled veterans with information on available services. It may be going on somewhere else. I don't know, but I think our job is to read the bill and make sure that is indeed what's happening. And again, I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I support the idea, but I don't want any unintended consequences for our veterans.
I guess I would point to, with regard to the first deletion, the seeking out veterans and dependents who may be eligible for pension program and benefits, rather than that being a responsibility of the program, it's listed under, if you go further up the page, subsection D as a requirement for the department. it says in conjunction with the types of community-based organizations listed in A2, shall develop communication tools to assist in identifying veterans and dependents who may be eligible for the deletes pension programs and then says benefits and programs offered by the department. So I would consider that a broadening from beyond just pension programs to various benefit programs that are offered by the department.
Okay, and it looks like they, was going to make an office. The program of this communications outreach and advocacy program is going to make sure they're managing the Veteran Service Animal Program. And then
Right.
somebody else is doing these other important responsibilities. Okay.
And then as far as providing wounded or disabled veterans with information on available services and benefits and support, I think if you look to, let's see, the top of page 5, if you look at each governmental unit shall, and then it's post on the unit's website, services available for veterans from the unit. I think that helps to perhaps address the language that's being deleted. Again, it's not specific to wounded or disabled veterans, but.
Okay, well, and maybe instead of burdening you, Lindsay, with additional jobs, since you're so busy, I will call George Owings myself. So take that off your plate and, make sure that there are no unintended consequences here, for some of the language that's being deleted in this bill. So I will take that responsibility. And if it's a problem, I'll report back to the full committee when we vote.
Okay. With that understanding, the motion is for favorable with amendments. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Or left, it's fine. It is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, I want to skip over 389 because that figures to be a long discussion and take up House Bill 399, and then we'll go back to 389. Council, House Bill 399.
This is a bill from the Prince George's County and Montgomery County delegations to extend the authorization for the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission's Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Program by 1 year. The background on that is that the program terminates periodically and is reauthorized based on a disparity study that's done every 5 years. Disparity study was supposed to have been done in 2020 and was delayed due to COVID. So they're asking to extend the program for 1 year to allow that disparity study to be finished.
Is there any discussion on the bill?
And I'm sorry, we do have delegation letters from both of the delegations in unanimous support.
In support.
Move
Thank you.
favorable.
Favorable, seconded. Is there favorable on the bill? Any discussion? On the motion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, House Bill 389, Procurement Minority Business Enterprises Revisions. Council, do you want to begin the discussion by summarizing the bill?
Sure. This bill implements the statutory recommendations that were included in the Department of Legislative Services evaluation of the Minority Business Enterprise Program. The report had 19 recommendations, 10 of which required changes to statute. The first recommendation was to require agencies to provide results of compliance assessments of completed contracts to GOSBA and require GOSBA to summarize results of those assessments in their annual report. That language appears on page 11 of the bill. The second recommendation was to require GOSBA to publish a list of prime contractors who persistently fail to meet MBE participation goals in the absence of mitigating factors. That language appears on page 12 of the bill. The report recommended requiring agencies to consider prime contractors' past performance with respect to MBE contract goals in assessing responsibility of a bidder or offerer. That language is on pages 2 and 3 of the bill. The report recommended repealing authorization to assess liquidated damages for failure to comply with the MBE program requirements. That's on page 8 of the bill. It recommended codifying an executive order requiring mid-sized procurements to be set aside for small businesses by designation in the Small Business Reserve Program. That is on pages 12 and 13 of the bill. The report recommended creating an MBE ombudsman in GOSBA to advocate on behalf of MBEs involved in disputes and mediate resolutions to disputes. That is on page 17 of the bill. And I will also note that that is the source of the fiscal note on the bill, the cost of the ombudsman and 3 staff people in GOSBA, which I'm told is okay from on high. There was a recommendation to extend the state's authority to withhold progress payments to prime contractors that do not pay subcontractors to all state contracts rather than just to construction contracts. That appears on pages 13 to 16 of the bill. Most of that is existing language in state law. It just expands it to all types of contracts. There's a recommendation to require GOSBA to establish statewide goals by industry type. That's on a few pages of the bill, pages 5, 10, and 11. There's a recommendation to require solicitation documents to include a brief summary of factors used to determine the MBE participation goal. That's also on several pages 3 and 4 and 8 of the bill. And the last is to allow graduated MBEs to maintain their MBE certification if they serve as effective mentors to new MBEs. That is also on several pages. It appears on page 4 of the bill with regard to the definition of an MBE, on page 10 with regard to MBE program regulations, and then on page 18 on the actual discussion of the mentoring program. There were no specific amendments offered on this bill, but the committee received letters of information from both MDOT and GOSBA that have language that seem to possibly suggest amendments from those agencies. And I believe they're both here at the subcommittee meeting today.
I think ultimately I would like to proceed by looking at each of the proposals to see what the views are of the committee. But first, let us hear briefly from the 2 executive branch agencies with regard to their views on the bill. So let's do first MDOT and then GOSBA. Ms. Helm.
Good morning, Chair Rosenberg. It's nice to be in front of HGO and not ENT in the House for once. I have with me today, I'm Pilar Helm from MDOT Government Affairs. I have with me today Ms. Tracy Watkins Rhodes, who is our Director of the Office of Small and Minority Business Policy here at MDOT. MDOT is the certification agency for the MBE program here in the state. And so our letter is very specific on the comments we have with relation to the bill language. So I would refer to that, but I also would turn it over to Tracy right now if she has any specific comments, but our letter is pretty specific down to page number and line. And so if the subcommittee would review that, I think that would probably be really helpful. But Tracy, do you want to make some comments? You're muted, Tracy.
Good afternoon. Tracy Watkins Rhodes, the Maryland Department of Transportation. I'm the Director of the Office of Small and Minority Business Policy for MDOT. And I don't have any specifics that I'd like to go over. I will say that if there are any issues or questions you have regarding certification specifically, we're ready to discuss those.
Okay, the representative from GOSBA. Is that Ms. Lewis? Lindsay, do you know who the representative is from GOSBA?
Yeah, it is Chantal. I see that she took her mute off, but I'm not sure if she's there.
Are you there, Ms. Lewis? All right, well, let us proceed.
If it would help, I can run through the recommendations that I just ran through with the feedback from both MDOT and GOSBA based on their written testimony.
Okay. So we're now Go ahead.
So, and just to clarify, oh, apparently Chantal says her sound is not working at the moment. She's in the chat. So just say something in the chat if I mischaracterize anything for you. Just to clarify, I'm going through these recommendations in the order they were listed in the report, which is why they're not necessarily in the order that they're in the bill. The first recommendation that I discussed, which is requiring agencies to provide results of compliance assessments, MDOT suggested in their written testimony to add the names and payments of contractors, both MBE and non-MBE contractors, to that information. And there's no feedback from GOSBA on that recommendation. The second recommendation was requiring GOSBA to publish a list of prime contractors who persistently fail to meet MBE participation goals. GOSBA offered feedback on this recommendation that they suggest that this could better be accomplished through improved contract monitoring, though I'm not sure what that would look like in terms of bill language, or if there's some sort of extra legislative fix there for improving the contract monitoring. And the next recommendation was about considering prime contractors' past performance with respect to MBE contract goals. There's no feedback from either. The liquidated damages recommendation, both MDOT and GOSBA would suggest repealing that language from the bill. MDOT suggested doing a study first. Presumably they're volunteering to conduct that study before removing the liquidated damages provision, and GOSBA suggested including a requirement that the ombudsman conduct training of agencies on perhaps implement the liquidated damages provision. I see Delegate Hill's got her hand up. Should I pause for a moment?
Sure, Delegate Hill.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if instead of Lindsay going through each one in the company, can we stop at each one and have the discussion of each one? Or is that possible? Because we're going through the list again, but now with the comments, and we're not having any discussion about what they've asked us to consider.
Lindsay, which is it easier for you?
Absolutely, I can do whatever is easiest for everybody.
Is it easier to do this for you going through the bill page by page, in page order, or by issue that's been raised by either of the two agencies?
I think it's probably easier to do it based on broader issue, and then we can figure out what the actual change would be. Because as I mentioned, most of these are broader suggestions that didn't suggest specific language changes to the bill. They were just sort of broader, like this could be accomplished perhaps doing this, or could make a tweak to the change. Does that make sense?
Okay. So why
Should
don't
I go
you
back to the beginning?
begin
And we'll
with
just
the
go with the
beginning?
first.
Correct.
The first recommendation that we discussed was requiring agencies to provide results of compliance assessments of completed contracts to GOSBA and require GOSBA to summarize results of assessments in their annual report. That recommendation, MDOT suggested adding the names and payments of contractors to that requirement.
Is there any objection to that? Okay, so we'll take that as support for council drafting.
I can barely hear you again.
Sorry, we'll take that as support for council drafting language that would adopt that change.
The next recommendation was to require GOSBA to publish a list of prime contractors who persistently fail to meet MBE participation goals in the absence of mitigating factors. This is the one where GOSBA did have feedback, which will make it trickier, perhaps that Chantal can't speak to us, but they suggested that this could better be accomplished through better contract monitoring rather than publishing this list online. I don't know specifically what that would look like, but if people would like to move forward with that, Chantal and I could work something out offline before next week.
Well, I think there would be no objection to seeing if you can work that out. Is that fair?
We'll note that this is somewhat tied to the next recommendation, which is require agencies to consider prime contractors' past performance with respect to MBE contract goals in assessing responsibility of the bidder or offer. Part of that was envisioned that if the contractor appeared on this list, that they would not then be able to be a responsible bidder or offer. But that could be assessed through other means as well without the existence of this list.
But the list certainly brings it into focus. Discussion? Delegate Kipke.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but it would be great to hear from GASBA about it. So perhaps if we could just put a magnifying glass on that for next week. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, there will be discussions between council and GASPA to see what language might be suitable for us to consider next week.
Okay.
Okay,
The next recommendation, just quickly, was the one that I just mentioned about past performance. There is no feedback from MDOT or GASBA on that one. The next recommendation was to repeal the authorization on liquidated damages. So that would require striking the language from the bill that repeals the liquidated damages authorization. So it would still be an option. MDOT suggested doing a study first on the reason that this was a recommendation from DLS is that it's not being used, right? The liquidated damages aren't actually being used as a penalty. So MDOT suggested doing a study, and GASBA suggested training agencies. This would be a new task of the ombudsman, training agencies on the use of liquidated damages so that they're aware that it's out there and how they could potentially implement it.
Delegate Hill.
Yeah, so that strikes me as circular. So DLS did the study, said that liquidated damages aren't being used. That's a tool that they've had for years. So to now go back and do a study about how they're not or are being used, to me just seems, I'm not clear from their comments on what a study is supposed to gain for us. And it's certainly, if there's training to be done, that doesn't mean you don't begin to apply liquidated damages. You just train your folks on how to do it. So what am I not hearing here, Lindsay, that would make sense about what their recommendations are?
I mean, I think the idea is the bill as it stands would repeal the authorization to apply liquidated damages. What both MDOT and GASBA are suggesting is keep that as an option for agencies that they could use liquidated damages. But MDOT is saying that there should be a study before just repealing it. There should be a study as far as why agencies aren't using it. What are the barriers? What, that would be some language that would have to be worked out as far as what's included in the study. And then GASBA is separately suggesting that there be training for agencies on the use of liquidated damages. Here, you have this as an option. Here's how you would do it if you wanted to apply liquidated damages, because perhaps, and the study might reveal this, that the reason it's not being used is because people aren't aware of it or think that it.
Got it. Okay, that's the reverse of what I thought they were saying. Okay.
It could also be that they don't want to use it because I think MDOT's letter, I don't recall exactly, but somebody suggested that it might be, that agencies don't want to apply the liquidated damages because they don't want to irritate contractors that they're working like regularly. So if that's the reason, then it's perhaps never going to be a useful tool.
And so DLS position was, since you're not using it, why are we giving you a tool you're not using? And they're saying before we take the tool away. Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, I would be in favor of going with those two recommendations, that we figure out why it's not being used before we remove it as a tool. And that's what I would move to amend the bill to do.
So you're supporting the study.
And the training, right?
Fine, good, both. Delegates Liga.
Well, the study may show that we do or don't need training. Do we want both?
I think you can do the study and training as indicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what the GASBA and Department of Transportation want, I think that's probably a good suggestion. I was just, wondering how the study and training would work together, but they'll make it work. They'll figure it out.
And council will get a little first exposure to that in the next week as they try to come up with language.
And I can work with MDOT in particular on what would be included in that study and sort of think through the details there.
Fine. Next.
The next one is the codification of the executive order requiring mid-sized procurements be set aside for small businesses. MDOT suggested allowing MBEs, DBEs, and SBEs to participate in the Small Business Reserve Program without a separate registration requirement. Because
Discussion?
of duplicative, more onerous.
There being no objection, we'll move forward with that.
The next requirement was the creation of the MBE ombudsman. GOSBA did express in their testimony concerns about ensuring that there were staff, but I mentioned that the staff were contemplated in the fiscal note, and I'm told that that will be okay cost-wise. So that was the only feedback on that one.
So the objection was not to the position, but to the cost.
Right, to the
And that has been addressed for.
like
yeah.
so many agencies understaffed, and they were concerned about the added workload. The next recommendation was to extend.
So there was, that's okay, no discussion.
But just a
Right.
one question, is can we, maybe it's already in the bill, but we have an opportunity to revisit. So if we get the ombudsman, if it's not already in there, can we get a report from the ombudsman in 2 years or something like that to see if the office is adequately staffed, if they're actually doing the job, if they're overstaffed, so just so we, does that make sense that we have some way to not just say we're going to create an ombudsman and don't look again, but get a report back, just like we did on the public information act ombudsman. We had her come back and tell us what was going on and how it was all working out.
Yep,
Delegates.
add that kind of a reporting into the bill.
Oh, yeah, I
No,
think that's a great idea. Maybe we need a report back on the entire bill to include the ombudsman and to see if we're making progress, as we're trying to do here with what's going on with the MBE program.
No objection?
Who do you envision that report coming from?
Yeah, good question, Lindsay. Maybe the folks that presented that report to us.
That's DLS.
Yeah. What do you think, Delegate Hill? I mean, I thought they did a good job. And that report is pretty thorough.
Right. I mean, then they can report back and tell us of all their recommendations, which ones have been carried out and what the responses are, and are they compliant now, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the bill came at their behest. So I think they would be the right ones to, check and see if the changes were made and were they effective.
Okay. That's supported.
This report, the bill goes into effect July 1st. When would you like the report? I mean, I think you would need at least a year.
I'd say two
to
years.
see the changes and then time for them to actually evaluate them.
Yeah, I think 2 would be, and they may not even have a full picture at that point because they've got to get the ombudsman hired and, all these other changes.
Well, with
But
the,
two is close enough that if there are things that we need to do to support it better, we can do that before they get too far down the road.
well, that would make, I would suggest the first report be due December 1st, 2023. So that
In
gives
time for us to act. Yeah.
Right. Annual first report beginning with December 1st, 2023.
Would you like an annual report from DLS on this, or is it a one-time report? Delegate Rosenberg, you're the one who just said annual report
It's up to the committee. I was speaking.
I mean, we could do an annual for 3 years, right? And sunset it.
I think that's a lot of work for a small department. We just need to be cognizant of the fact that, the folks that gave us that report are, said they'd like to do more. They enjoyed that research and they'd like to do more, but they just don't have time.
So if we're going to do it one time, then I think we want it in 2024. I mean, I see your point, Delegate Rosenberg, but I think that if we want more than one report, December 2023 makes sense, so it doesn't get too far along. But if we're just looking at a report to decide if what we've done is sufficient, then I would think we want to give them a good year to get started and a good year to actually do the work.
No, I agree with you, Delegate Hill. I think if we do a 2-year, then they will have hopefully gotten things well underway. But, we're not tapping DLS to,
But what we could do, I'm sorry, delegates, and to the whole team, I feel like we're playing, the 3 of us are playing some kind of volleyball. there may be components that we want to see here from in December 2023, right? Like we may want to know about the study on the, what did we talk about? The financial, what did we talk about? Two things. We take the money back, right?
The liquidated damages.
Right, so we might want to hear about liquidated damages.
That's a study from MDOT, and we're talking about a study from DLS on the update of
Okay,
the.
so maybe we hear from MDOT in December 2023. And because we're not going to act on liquidated data damages, maybe we hear from the ombudsman, but maybe it's not till December 2024 that we ask DLS to give us another look back at everything that we're trying to do. Just a thought.
That sounds reasonable to me. Like you said, Delegate Hill, it's the three of us playing volleyball.
Although Delegate Kaiser is smiling in the corner there.
The ball is still in the air, and we will bounce it over to council based on the most recent assessment proposal.
Yep, I think I've got it.
Do you have a sense of it?
Studies right now. There's the MDOT on the liquidated damages for December 2023. There's the ombudsman's report on their staffing levels also for December 2023. And then a DLS report on the recommendations, which will presumably include feedback from those two reports for December 2024.
Ms. Rowe, this is Tracy Rhodes from MDOT. Pertaining to the study for liquidated damages, as that is a statewide issue regarding the implementation of all agencies, I think that would be more in the basket of GOSPA as the agency that implements or administers the program statewide. We would definitely assist in doing whatever survey or study they have. But I don't know if it's appropriate to have MDOT be the lead on that specific effort.
GOSPA? Oh, well, are you chatting or no?
Tracy's point seems very reasonable and valid to me.
And Ms. Rowe, we can talk about it later because I know that Chantal's having issues, technical issues. But that's something we can talk about a little further. But I just wanted to bring that
From
point
my
up.
perspective, it's easy enough to assign to either party, so it's just up to you guys.
Okay. We'll proceed in that fashion. Thank you. Council.
The next recommendation was about extending the state's authority to withhold progress payments to all types of contracts. There was no feedback from either MDOT or GOSPA on this. Requiring GOSPA to establish a statewide goal by industry type. Both MDOT and GOSPA had concerns about this expressed in their letters of information. And no real suggested changes there. I think that both would have struck this language from the bill in their opinion.
Well, I think we should wait until we can hear from both at next week's.
And let me, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think Lindsay and I think it was MDOT, and they're here. They actually said that they thought a more practical and efficient approach, if I'm talking about the right section, is to tracking spend patterns would be to track the MBE participation in the state's 6 major procurement categories: construction, architectural, engineering, and other construction-related maintenance, IT services, and commodities, rather than industry specific. And do you have any idea why DLS's recommendation was industry specific rather than these established categories?
I'm not certain about why it wasn't those categories. But you're right, I'm sorry, MDOT did include that in their letter as a potential change there.
Can I, it could be just a terminology issue, because sometimes when we're in operating this program, folks will confuse industry with procurement categories because they sometimes overlap. but procurement categories are more specific and they're already listed in state statute.
So I'm thinking that, again, we're going to get a good look back at this in a couple of years, that for now we take MDOT's suggestion and we direct DLS specifically when they do the comparison study on progress, that they address that particular recommendation and whether what we agreed to do as MDOT recommended is sufficiently addressing the deficiency, or whether they stand by their original recommendation.
Seeing no objection.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking. I guess I was only talking to me. So, Mr. Chairman, what I was recommending, since we're going to have a look back, is that we take MDOT's recommendation and we direct DLS specifically when they give us the review to look at whether the procurement categories has worked well enough, or whether DLS will stand by their original recommendations that the reporting be done by industry type.
That's fine. I can incorporate that into the study language.
Okay, good.
I'm going to jump to the last recommendation. There's 2 left, but I'm going to jump to the last one because I know the MDOT folks have to leave the subcommittee meeting at noon. The last one was to allow graduated MBEs to maintain their MBE certification if they serve as effective mentors. And both GOSBA and MDOT had concerns about this in their letters of recommendation. And this one, I believe without any change, they would strike this language from the bill.
Ms. Rose? Do you wish to speak to this, Ms. Rose?
Sure, I can speak to that. One of the issues that I want to make sure that the committee is clear on is that when firms graduate from the MBE firm, they typically don't graduate as a whole. When firms are certified, they're certified under certain NAICS codes, and a very small percentage of firms are certified in one NAICS code only. So if you're a construction firm, you will be certified in possibly 3 or 4 different types of NAICS codes related to construction. And depending on how your business operates, you'll be able to, your business might be doing more, bringing in more dollars in one of those NAICS codes areas in the other NAICS code area. So once you meet that specific threshold in that specific NAICS code, then you would graduate. You graduate out of the NAICS code, but you're still a certified MBE for the other NAICS codes that you were certified under. So that's where the issue in terms of, allowing firms that have graduated to become, to remain MBEs is a little moot because they're still MBEs.
Discussion?
So, yeah, I mean, we sort of, again, recommend that we go ahead with that. They're certainly closer to it. DLS will have an opportunity to address it. If it's a problem for the sponsor, before we get to committee, we can hear from the sponsor why that recommendation is problematic.
So the effect of the discussion would be that this provision would not be in the bill. It would be,
Right, that would be that's what I would suggest we do. And that we also, all these changes that we're doing, we take back to the sponsor, Delegate Wilson. And
I would add to that as well as to the DLS staff.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay. Seeing no objection.
Can I ask one question, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly. I'm sorry, you did have your hand up before.
Yeah, and I took it down because I was kind of just back reading through and just trying to understand what Ms. Rhodes was speaking on. But I understand where you were going with about the codes, and there's no way to make changes to those. Is that correct? To get to the bill sponsor's desired outcome? Does that make sense?
It's my understanding that the thrust of that specific provision is to have former MBEs who have shown that they could be successful in whatever field they are to serve as mentors
Right.
to upcoming MBEs, I guess, or those that
Right.
are newer to entering the industry. I am not, because an MBE remains an MBE until he's graduated, he or she has graduated out of all of their codes. I'm not sure how that would be done. And I know that also the OAG had some issues around some constitutional issues on that. I can't speak to that, but there was some constitutional concerns with that specific provision as well.
But you're not opposed to the concept of having a mentor for the MBE?
Oh, no, I don't think anyone would be, opposed to that, especially if there are MBEs who are willing, successful MBEs that are willing to participate.
Mhm.
Yes, but I think in trying to link it to MBE certification is a little difficult. I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
If I may, to follow up, how would you encourage that mentorship? Ms. Rhodes, if I can ask, how would
Sure.
you encourage that mentorship in another way?
I don't know. I do know that there has been attempts over, probably since the program began, but I don't know how that would work, especially in terms of having, former MBE, certified MBE firms do it. I really don't know. I mean, that's something that I know GOSPA had been looking into, and that was one of the things that they had been trying to do in terms of developing small businesses. But, unfortunately, I'm not sure.
Well, why don't that be part of your discussion with GOSPA and council over prior to next week's subcommittee meeting?
Okay.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, is that correct, council?
Well,
Thank
actually,
you.
I just wanted to go back real
Okay.
quick. I noticed that Chantal posted in the chat, with respect to the liquidated damages study, I believe GOSPA already has a sense of the limitations on application of liquidated damages at the agency level. We have anecdotal evidence. We would recommend simply the training on application, and then perhaps if we do not see a rise in utilization of the tool, then we conduct further analysis if necessary. So it sounds like Chantal is suggesting that the study be delayed to after the implementation of the training, that if there isn't an uptick in use, someone would presumably need to be tasked with determining whether or not there's been an uptick in use. Then at that point, do a study.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Hill.
Thank you. So I think that's really logical, except that I'm not clear if they have an indication of what the issue is, why training hasn't already been initiated. Why do they need this to do this? In other words, they think they know what the problem is anecdotally. Why aren't they already addressing it?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wonderful. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what the issue was, but with respect to liquidated damages, it is very specific down to how the contract is actually monitored day to day. There are several prerequisites that need to happen before you can apply liquidated damages. You have to put that contractor on notice. That they need to either implement a corrective action plan if they aren't meeting their goals yet. And I think a lot of times agencies miss the mark in terms of the monitoring. And so they miss that window to actually be able to implement the liquidated damages because a lot of the precursory things that would need to occur in order to actually utilize that tool have not happened. And so that's when we talk about improved compliance measures that would simultaneously improve liquidated damages implementation as well.
Well, why don't we see if we council, let's put this on your plate still with the other two to see if you can resolve it or have at least a recommendation for us for next week. Okay, anything further?
So the recommendation that I jumped over to get to the last one was require solicitation documents to include a brief summary of the factors used to determine the MBE participation goal. MDOT's letter didn't speak to this recommendation, but GOSBA's letter did express a concern. But since we can hear from Chantal, I'll let her discuss it.
Sure. In terms of what it was including the goal setting provisions in the solicitation. Yes. Currently, the BPW already has on their website all of the factors that are used in terms of consideration for how an MBE goal is set. Those considerations are static; they don't change. But in terms of the actual goal setting, there are nuances that would require I think more than would be able for someone to put in a solicitation document. There is the opportunity for vendors to request that documentation. There are PRGs that are held bi-monthly, and the agencies do document the PRG process. And so there is the opportunity to receive those documents if necessary, but I do think that that this would probably cause quite a bit of slowdown in terms of awarding contracts because there are so many nuances in the goal setting process.
Comments? None. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see, council, if there's some language that could potentially address that.
All right, I'll have further discussions with Chantal.
Fine. Okay. Okay. I think this has been helpful in to some degree narrowing, but also our goal will be, council will have these recommendations to us prior, as is always the case, prior to the hearing, prior to the subcommittee meeting next week, and we will proceed from there. Okay, we have no other business before us. We are adjourned. Full committee is at 1:30, correct? See you then. Thank you very much.